there will be robotics. There will be automation on the job site, but it's not replacing people. Mm-hmm. When you show up, the robotics and the augmentation are going to be things that you use as tools every day to get your job done. And we're going to see things that we see in our world already today. There was a Waymo car next to me on the way here today. That technology is coming to the job site.
According to McKinsey's new productivity report, construction, which is already one of the largest industries, has to double its current growth rate in order to meet demand by 2040. And what we've seen is the tremendous top-line growth that the industry is currently experiencing, while also noticing we're eroding our profit in the process. And so how are we looking at the risk that comes with growth at this rate and at this pace? And the question we find ourselves asking is, are we ready for the future of construction? Welcome to the Power of Construction podcast. I'm Sasha, Reid.
And I'm Kris, Lengieza. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain a bit on the future of our industry. We're really going to talk about some of the foundational shifts that need to happen in our industry to actually be able to keep up with this growth rate. We're going to dive into our report, The Future State of Construction, and bring you some new data and forward-looking insights about how we can prepare for what's next. So, should we jump in?
Yeah, I feel like the best way to set this up is I'm going to interview you because...
Sounds great.
You've been on a world tour preparing for the launch of this report. Tell us a little bit about what has your journey been like? Where have you been the last few weeks?
Well, it's not just about the last few weeks. I mean, this is a project that we've been working on for over a year. I've had the opportunity to literally circle the globe. Dublin, Dubai, Sydney, California, Texas, just about everywhere where we have customers and projects. I've been meeting with them to talk about what does the future of our industry look like? And we've run workshops and we've taken the opportunity to really gather their insights alongside with the trends that we know are impacting our industry to really think about what does the future state look like? And so it's been an awesome experience because I think we've talked to well over 1,000 customers at this point. And we've run, I think, over 10 workshops to discuss this topic. And it always leads to some really fun interactions.
Now, was that always the plan that when you thought about creating this report, it was an integral piece of it to actually get in front of customers and have these workshops? How'd the workshops come about?
Yeah, so it's, the thing is that there's not a lot of places where the industry gets to sit down and divorce themselves a little bit from the day-to-day and kind of break outside of the ways that they think to talk about what the industry could look like 10 years from now. And so we had the opportunity to work with a partner in BTS to design a series of workshops where we really asked them to stretch. We took these future states that were 8-10 years out there and we sat down and we talked about it. And we didn't talk about any of the things that are happening really today, but more about what could happen and what we would need, like what would be the most impactful if it came to fruition. And this just gave us so much insight. And one of the things that we heard from the customers is they don't get the opportunity to have these conversations. So we needed to bring these forums together, and that's why I'm really excited for this episode of the podcast because we're bringing this forum and these discussions to an even larger audience.
Yeah, exactly. And I had the privilege of being on part of your world tour, not the full extent, but part of your world tour. And one of the things that struck me in helping you facilitate the workshops was I have one group that in mind in particular, and I remember as we were kind of talking to them about the concepts of thinking 10, maybe even pushing them to think 20 years in the future. And some of these future states that you're going to share with us today, we intentionally pushed way out beyond even our comfort zone of saying we have a good sense that this is really going to happen. But that was really intentional because we wanted to create almost like a pushing them to think broader than today's business. It's just so easy for leaders to think about what's happening right now and focus on that. But one of the things that I noticed is we actually got feedback from some customers saying at the start of the breakout groups, like, I'm not comfortable. Yeah. This is really uncomfortable. Someone actually said to me, like, I don't even want to do this. I don't believe anything that we're talking about is going to really happen because of where we are today. And so as we went through the process of walking into these future states, thinking about what that means, how that changes the business, I saw something, and I like to call it a little magic. I saw something almost magical happening, which was we saw a collision, if you will, between the current state of where the industry is today and what those leaders were thinking, and customers who were a little bit further along in that digital maturity curve who would challenge that and say, actually, we're already doing like 20% of that. We're already doing those things to get to that future state. So we saw this really amazing opportunity for peer leaders, and there was owners, general contractors, specialty contractors, to information share about what things they're doing. And that created a completely different dynamic and conversation amongst them.
Yeah, what I love about that is all of these future states, all these conversations were all rooted in things that we had seen our customers doing today. And we're going to explore some of those things today when we talk through these future states. And I think that conversation doesn't happen a lot, right? Yeah, we see stuff on a big stage somewhere or in a news article. And I think inherently we're not the most trusting of an industry. So we got, that's all marketing, right? Yep. And so I think customers and prospects and leaders in the industry having that conversation together and getting the opportunity to ask some critical questions really was allow them to say, oh, maybe some of this stuff really is happening and really it is possible. Maybe it's not so distant off in the future that we're going to see some of these future states come to reality.
I think that's what you and I learned last season was as we were having conversations with leaders, we saw that there are some customers that are overcoming those headwinds and they're just further along. And we really need to make sure that that's understood and that conversation is had. So why don't we get set up now to look at some of these future states, if you will. Kris, I'd love if you could, when we take it a level lower, there's been a lot of industry reports that have come out. And to your point, I think there's a lot of crystal ball magic thinking around how we're going to get from where we are today to this utopic future state. But I haven't really seen a report that's kind of addressed the headwinds that we're experiencing today. So tell me a little bit. Let's take this a level down and talk about what some of the challenges are that are facing the businesses in construction.
Yeah, and none of these headwinds or challenges are things that we probably haven't talked about before or that you're not already familiar with. But we understand that 41% of the workforce is going to be gone by 2031. So we have a future workforce challenge. And so we need to evolve there. We know that 45% of projects run over budget or behind schedule by at least 20%. That means we have a productivity challenge that needs to be solved. And we need to evolve what the future of productivity looks like in the future. And so I think one of the questions we really need to ask ourselves are, what do we need to do differently in the future to close the gap between the growth that we know is happening, this massive growth that's happening in our industry, but the divergence because of the risk in our profitability? And how do we bring those two things closer to each other instead of them just continuing to get further and further apart? And that is, we need to invest in these future states, right? And that we need to better manage the risk that comes along with that growth. So, throughout these conversations, the one thing that I really came to realize is that tomorrow is really filled with opportunity for all of us, right? There are so many things that we can go do. I mean, you look at what this industry is capable of, and there is no doubt that we can overcome this challenge. And because we know where we've been, we also can have a really good sense of where we're headed and what's possible when we do this together. But we believe that there's kind of 4 foundational shifts that need to happen in our industry. And each of those is really rooted in one of 3 things, or all 3 of them for that matter, which is people.
Yep.
They are the core to our industry. They are literally the backbone of everything we do. Platforms, so platforms, technology, connected technology that allows us to operate differently than maybe we have in the past. And then data, right? Our ability to use data, to collect data, and to drive better decision-making in the future. And so when we think about these areas and these shifts, we need them to be able to lean on those 3 areas to be effective.
So, okay, let's agreed. I mean, and you and I have been having conversations about those 3 things for probably as long as we've known each other.
Absolutely.
So I feel like same song sheet. We're well aware of these 3 factors, but let's really kind of take this, and I'd love you to walk us through what are the 4 focus areas that you've broken this report down into.
Yeah, and so the 4 focus areas are really around the future of productivity, the future of the workforce, the future of decision making, and the future of design, right? And let me paint a picture for each one of those for you. So if we think about the future of productivity, what we're really talking about there is the blend of automation and augmentation on the job site, right? There will be robotics. There will be automation on the job site, but it's not replacing people. When you show up, the robotics and the augmentation are going to be things that you use as tools every day to get your job done. And we're going to see things that we see in our world already today. There was a Waymo car next to me on the way here today. That technology is coming to the job site. And it's not limited by what's necessary for public roads to operate inside of a job site. And there's enough skill and engineering and technical know-how out there today to bring it to our industry.
And other industries are doing it too.
And other industries are doing it.
Yeah, there's examples of how this is actually an operating piece of the business.
And so we strongly believe that in the future, you'll show up to a job site which will be this blend of expertise and labor and skill with tools and robotics and augmentation that'll allow them to really focus on the most valuable tasks and eliminate a lot of the repetitive, dirty, dull things that don't require a lot of time. The second area is around our future of the workforce. So we just talked about robotics coming and how is that going to impact the workforce? But the reality is like we're not eliminating anybody, and we need to retain that expertise in a big way. And so how can we leverage technology? How can we leverage AI? How can we leverage learning from the next generation to pass down that knowledge, to do that knowledge transfer, whether it's more natural language collection of information, more integration to mobile technology that's always on, where we can bring experts right to the job site no matter what your problem is. But that's also the stuff that's going to attract and then retain talent in our industry, because we know that investing in that will bring people who are like, this stuff is cool. I want to work in an industry which is going to leverage the latest and greatest. And then as we think about how much data we're collecting, we have to think about how we make decisions in the future. Today, you probably sit down and you look at some spreadsheets and maybe you look at your software, but you're still heavily relying on your guts and the things that you know. And we believe that data is going to become really a silent partner to you in the future, helping you repeat those past successes and avoid the pitfalls. And lastly, when we talk about how we are effective in projects, a lot of the risk comes in from the design side. And what we've seen is the evolution of tools that are going to make design more automated. Not necessarily the pretty picture side of it, but more the engineering and the automation. Today, those things are plagued by human error in a lot of ways. And builders and owners and contractors have so much data on what works and what delivers the most value, the most constructability, the most cost-effective natures. We need to put those things to work. And so we believe that there'll be an evolution of how much control and vertical integration there will be on the build side, almost moving a bit more back towards that master builder mentality where they are way more involved, way heavier in the process.
No, I think it's so funny because when you and I started these conversations, when this project began and the idea of the report was, kind of this nice to have, you and I had some conversations around your future state that I was like, I don't know, Kris, I don't know if I see it. And one of the things that I'm just realizing as we're sitting here talking about it is a year ago when we were having those conversations, I was not leveraging AI in my current role the way I am. It hadn't been fully integrated at Procore. It wasn't as readily available and not just available, but embedded in the work that I'm doing. There's almost 60% of the work that I do now, it's like having an intern. It's that silent partner. I love calling it the silent partner because when we had a conversation a year ago, I didn't have a concept for that really. And I was trying to then apply it to construction and was just kind of like, okay, this is Kris being a data nerd and like envisioning something happening. But I think we're now, just in a year's time, we're now actually seeing some of these things come to life in ways that they can very real and practically be applied to the business. So that's what I want to do next. I want to really... Let's get to that because the last thing I feel like I want to do is have technology people say how the future state is going to be perfect.
Yeah.
So let's actually dive into each of these and let's take it a level deeper and actually talk about where the rubber meets the road on this. So talk to me about the future of productivity. What are you visioning?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we know that 45% of projects are over budget and over schedule, right? That's from our How We Build Now report. But we've also been told in our recent data, as we did our Future State of Construction survey, that tech adoption is cited as the #1 opportunity for growth and innovation in construction. So we know that people are still betting pretty heavily that we're going to innovate with technology. And one of those technologies and innovation is robotics, right? And, I was probably a little bit more of a naysayer on this one until I actually saw it in real life. And I had the opportunity to be on a job site with WinVic over in Birmingham in England. And I saw multiple robotics technologies in existence happening at the same time, whether it was their site layout robot that they were using to lay out on the floor, or it was the remote operated crane that they were using to be more efficient with their picks and be safer. These things that are coming together, I think, are really interesting as it's not a question of if they will happen, it's when they will be widely adopted and we will start to recognize the full benefits of them. The technology is there. It exists in other industries, right? We talk about self-driving cars. We talk about, robotics that are happening in factories. What is it that we need to actually have happen to make it happen on the job site? And I think what's a really interesting stat is that 55% of our respondents believe that these type of technologies will very or extremely disrupt our industry in the next 5 years. And over 80% believe that they will disrupt it altogether. And so we're not telling you anything you don't know because clearly you all believe this is going to be disruptive. The question is how quick can we get there and how can we bring these technologies together to actually deliver on the productivity that we need? And I think that's why we want to have these deeper conversations on the podcast, is so that others can tell us how they're using these things already and we can learn from them so we can implement it inside of our businesses as well.
And I can imagine if I'm putting myself in the shoes of contractors and in the conversations we've had, even if you philosophically align on a vision state of the future, the questions come really quickly. How? How are we going to do this? Especially with it's almost like we know too much. We've been doing this for a long time. We're well experienced in how to run the business of construction. But how do we go from where we are today to there? And the future of workforce, I think, is, at least in the conversations we've had, I do see this as an accelerant or a key that'll unlock a next level. So talk me through the vision of where we are currently with the future of workforce and where you see this going?
Yeah, it'll be no shocker to anybody that the data tells us from the Future State of Construction report that the labor shortage is still the number one concern of the industry over the next few years. And a lot of that has to do with the people that are leaving the industry, the age of our industry, and the fact that knowledge transfer between those generations is one of the areas that we could invest in heavily in order to continue to accelerate the industry. But it's also one of the areas where we see a disconnect between both executive leadership and actual use out in the industry. And so we really need to double down in order to really bring along the next generation of our workforce. And I think technology helps us in a big way. One, those coming into the industry, they want to be in an industry where technology is being leveraged, right? They want to take advantage of those best tools. But also it can help us capture and bridge the gap on that knowledge, right? We can use AI. We can use our ability to extend careers because we now allow senior expertise to lean in on more job sites, on more projects with more people because they don't have to physically be there anymore. I mean, I'm wearing a set of meta glasses right now. How far are we away from the ability that you're just going to be able to see what I'm seeing no matter where I am on the job site? And these are the type of things that I think are really going to extend the expertise that we have in the industry. And a great example of this, we have a customer that was telling us last week at our customer advisory board, they're bringing people out of retirement to try and capture this knowledge and to try and transfer that knowledge downstream to more of the industry. And so I think that is so incredibly important that we leverage our tools to move the industry forward by investing in the workforce and be able to bridge that gap.
No, I think to me, that's so logical. We've heard about this over, let's say, the last 12 to 15 years, the amount of technology that's been delivered to the business of construction. Well, it starts, I think, with the job site. The amount of technology delivered to the job site has now really started to put the focus on the business and how are those tools that have replaced, clipboard and pen with iPad sometimes. How have we really started to have that evolve so that it's now looking at and transforming the business and how the business operates? So do you see that future state with the workforce being transformationally different than where it is today and what tools they'll be using?
I think so. I think we're seeing a big transformation on the tools they'll be using. But I think one of the biggest things that's going to transform is how they make decisions in the future, right? And how it is that they are going to leverage data and leverage that data as a silent partner to them. I mentioned that before, but we have such a huge opportunity to take these learnings and make it so that the industry can repeat the successes and avoid the pitfalls, right? And if you think about being a new hire into the industry, we don't have the opportunity to invest as much in their careers as maybe we used to. And so it's hard for them to sometimes learn the things that they need to look out for. It's very much like an intern, right? Like if you give an intern a project and you don't give them any context, the odds of you getting something back that you're going to be happy with are pretty low. We've got to invest in their education the same way we need to invest in AI. And this is where decision-making is going to go, right? We are not leveraging data to its fullest potential today. And data-driven decision-making didn't even rank in the top 5 areas that were impacting successful digital transformation today in the report. It's pretty crazy to think about that. So this is a currency that companies are going to trade in the future, and it's going to replace that need to have gut instincts so that we can actually be more reliant on actual data to make decisions instead of just what we have known from previous experience or what we think we have known from previous experience. And, it's also going to help us a lot save time and energy, right? The report tells us that it helps save up to 13% of the time on total spending if they could more effectively capture, integrate, and standardize the data that they're using. And so when you think about that, 13% is a lot. It's actually a little bit better than it was before. We heard previous stats of 18% of time is spent just looking for information. This seems like a slight improvement, but we have a long way to go on how we use data and use it to our competitive advantage in this industry.
And I think one of the things that I'd be curious is, in the conversations, were there any customers that you were talking to? Because the statistic you started with here kind of shocked me.
Yeah.
In the overall body of the report, that this was seen so low or was responded so low. Did you have conversations with any customers who were starting to implement this, or did you see signs of this getting implemented?
Yeah, there's one customer that I've been having a lot of conversations around this, and the way that they're using their data in conjunction with building AI agents to help their teams both in the field and in the office. I think a lot of people go, oh, AI agents are great to automate things like submittals and RFIs, but they're also using the agents to help their field workers pick the action to do faster just by taking photos and training it on their best practices, training it on their policies and procedures. And so there are examples where people are really already leaning into how they're using data to drive their decision-making today. And it's completely possible, right? It's still hard, don't get me wrong, but it is possible and people are doing it today.
You mentioned something that's a concept that I'm so excited for us to really dive into. And I think about the podcast and kind of what we're going to have coming up in the conversation having with leaders is training your agent. I think pulling some of these practical building blocks out in order to have a conversation around AI that it's less theoretical and it's more practical, I think is going to be really important. And that flows very nicely then into your focus area of the future of design. So talk us through current state. What does that look like, and what did you find out in your conversations? Yeah,
and the reality is that we know that like engineering really only suffers from human error today, right? And the path to automation of a lot of those tasks.
That's a brave statement.
It is. It is. I mean, unfortunately, it's when people make mistakes that we pay attention, right? And like a lot of the software that's out there, in the next 8 to 10 years, the tools we're using are going to become that much more intuitive. They're going to become a lot easier for people to use, which I think is what that's going to mean is that contractors, owners, general contractors, trades, they have all this data, back to the data again, that tells them what's constructible, that tells them what is the right solution for the problem they're having. And if we can apply that data to our engineering processes, to our design processes, I think what you're going to see is a much more vertically integrated future where those contractors are going to take advantage of this and really like take a step forward by taking more control of the process. And we're already seeing this, right? There are softwares that are out there today that are focused on specific trades, whether it's electrical or mechanical, that people are putting to work to take over the creation of the detailed design process. And when I spoke to a large engineering firm, I asked them, like, are you worried about this? And they said, no, we're not worried about this because we've already started to pivot the value that our engineers bring to the table. And we're actually working more closely with the contractors than we ever have before because they recognize that things like drafting and just coming up with the construction docs is not where they add value today. And so I think we're into a really interesting future where we're going to see the way that design is handled and how much power and how much integration there is on the build side is going to be significantly more than what we've seen in the past.
Well, I'm excited about that piece because I know initially when you and I were talking about this future state and you were kind of sharing with me your future design, you and I had a lot of disagreements on what that future state would actually look like. But I think we are finally at a tipping point where the application of technology to the field has finally unlocked the black box that has been where all the gold lies. When those design documents and construction documents are given to the field, and then the field has the challenging task of actually working with all these disparate trades to build the product, we're finally starting to see some of those, I'll call them like nodes, some of those things connect. So I'm really excited to have a conversation with you about that piece and with some of our customers about it, because I do think there's still some debate around what does that look like and how does that operate. So Kris, thank you so much for sitting down today to kind of have a conversation with us about the future state of construction. I think this report, both of us were pretty much like, this can't just be a off-the-shelf report that we've seen, because I think there's nothing worse than having spent the last 15 years collectively in careers of really pushing and innovating, only to be told we're still lagging. So I'm excited to see this report come out and maybe get a little bit beyond the headlines of what this future state looks like to actually getting into the how we get there, and dare I say, maybe getting inspired by customers who are actually doing that work.
Well, and I think the thing that really inspires me here is we now have a place we want to work towards. And we're already starting to run workshops with our customers today on how do we get there? What are the wind in our sails? What's pushing us forward?
Yeah.
What are the great examples that are already working? But also, what are the challenges and the potential risks that are there? And it's only as an industry that if we come together, can we start to address some of those challenges and risks to make sure that we can actually make these future states a reality. And that's what I get really excited about.
Well, good. I appreciate your time and energy and excitement, and even a little skepticism I'll throw in there, because I think you're right. It is going to help us get there. So thank you for sitting down today. And for those of you who are watching, I want to encourage you to download the full Future State of Construction report. Test it out for yourself. Have conversations within your own organization to see where you align and what that future state is. And I don't know, maybe uncover some of the departments within the organization that are already getting to the how, and create that cross-departmental information sharing, if you will. And so for those of you watching, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll keep bringing you the stories of construction leaders who are building our future tomorrow using the power of construction.